welcome to today's episode. Now, you probably have heard of the recent news that 9 generals from the PLA has been purged from the party, and I'm here to make a video about what's going on here. Now, if you look at these photos, some of them I've basically been talking about for more than a year now, so if you follow China Insider, well, congratulations, you're about a year ahead on China news. Now, Xi Jinping seemingly just shot himself in the foot by purging 9 of these generals and many more major and lieutenant generals as well. But this would have been the running sort of storyline of before 2024. But since obviously we know things are different since last year, we have to understand what's going on. Now, this time it's quite different in my opinion. What you see here, the photos of these 9 generals, you have He Weidong, you have Mao Hua, who I've frequently talked about now. You have these other guys who might be less familiar, which I'll introduce them. But they were announced by the Defense Department today, or yesterday. And basically what's been happening is that before there's widespread rumors around some of them that they had been purged or they disappeared under investigation. Specifically, we're talking about Mao Hua and He Weidong, who have both been rumored to have been purged like a year ago. And then some of the other ones, more recent, even as far as a few months ago. And many of the 9 generals have only been in their post for less than 2 years, or maybe just 2 years. So let's talk about these. The first guy we have is He Weidong. He's the second vice chair of the Central Military Commission, which essentially is the 3rd most powerful man in the Chinese military. He's been tasked mainly to come up with the invasion plan for Taiwan. This is Mao Hua, who is the political commissar of the entire military. Essentially, that's like the party secretary, which carries out the party work of the military. I had these two messed up. He Hongjun is the one that's in charge of political work in the party, so he's like a party secretary, or secretary of the military. And then Wang Shoubin is the one who was the former commander of the Southern Theater and then also the Joint Operations Command. And then Lin Xiangyang is the commander of the Eastern Theater, which essentially is the theater closest to Taiwan that's responsible for the Taiwan invasion once again. All right, let's go down. Down on the bottom left here, we got Chen Shutong. Chen Shutong is the secretary of the, you could say like the army, essentially again doing the party affairs stuff. Then you have Yuan Huazhi, who is the same position but for the Navy. Wang Houbin is the commander of the rocket force. So this guy has only been in power for 2 years. The last purge of the rocket force, he was brought in from the Navy in order to be the loyal person inside the party at the time so that, you know, because of what happened with the rocket force, I've done a video on that, so you can go search for it on the channel. But last but not least, Wang Chunning is the commander of the People's Armed Police, which essentially is like the police wing of the military. So having said all of this stuff, right? So there's 9 of the generals, and there's 4 who are lieutenant generals. They are like the deputies basically, and then another, I think 15 or so major generals, which is again a step down. But these 9 are the main ones because most of these come from a Fujian military base called the 31st. And in the 31st, again, Fujian is also very close to the invasion of Taiwan as well. So Xi Jinping brought in all these people after his waves of purges to focus on developing the Taiwan invasion plan. And what they've done essentially, if I had to summarize all of that, is they purged the top commander of the theater that's responsible for the invasion of Taiwan. They took down 3 political commissars, one for the entire military, one for the Navy, one for the army. They took down the police chief of the military. They took down the guy who was helping with the joint operations, which again goes into the invasion as well. The second vice chair of the military, like the top guy, right? There's only 2 people above him, which is Xi Jinping and Zhang Youxia. And then also the head of the political work, which is like the government stuff, secretary stuff, and also rocket force. So every single major important aspect of the Taiwan invasion has been purged. And so this conservatively would push the plan of invasion back 3 to 5 years, in my opinion, which I think is a good thing. Now, these people were mostly promoted by Xi Jinping. Some of them broke the ranks, right? They weren't there for their seniority, but they were there for their loyalty, or at least that's what we thought. So with a degree of confidence, I can say that this purge is different, it's weird, it's strange, it doesn't happen because of Xi Jinping wanted it. But again, this story came out from the Ministry of Defense. I'll show you the official announcement. So this was the official announcement. I translated in English. It says, He Weidong, Mao Hua, and 9 others were expelled from the party and the military for serious violation of discipline and law. It was the spokesperson of the Defense Department that said it. Now, something very interesting in here is that says, since the 18th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, the entire military and the armed police force have resolutely implemented the decisions and directives of the CPC, Central Committee, and the Central Military Commission. And it stops there. It just doesn't mention Xi Jinping in this, which if we understand traditionally, Xi Jinping is the core. It should be equivalent to the Central Committee as well as the Central Military Commission, but this time they don't include his name, which is one of the indicators as to why this purge isn't him, where prior to 2024, it was all about him, right? So in the original announcement, it doesn't mention his name, but also doesn't mention the 2 establishes and the 2 upholds, which are the core governance principle of Xi Jinping. So it doesn't mention that either. The investigation reveals that these 9 individuals have seriously violated party discipline, were suspected of serious duty-related crimes involving an extreme large amount of money of extremely serious nature, extremely detrimental consequences. So they say here that these 9 individuals violated party discipline, seriously violated party discipline. It doesn't tell us exactly what it is, right? If I had to guess, they're trying to pin this on corruption, which by all means, like, it's never the main issue. But this tells me that this purge is not from Xi Jinping, but from his right-hand man named Zhang Youxia. Used to be believed to be Xi's right-hand man, but since then we've found a lot of evidence suggesting otherwise. So that's him. Going back to this, this is all happening 48 hours before the 4th plenum is supposed to take place, where we essentially learn whether or not Xi Jinping will step down. Which right now, if I had to take a educated guess, I would say with a high degree of confidence, I would say 70 to 80% that he will step down from some roles, especially the military power. But that's not the important thing right now, because the important thing is, of the 9 people, some of these, like most of these people, are considered diehard Xi fans, right? Diehard Xi Jinping goons. And if these people were getting removed, then where is the Taiwan invasion going to go? Is it still happening? And if these people are removed, what does that say about Xi Jinping's power? Did he really shoot himself in the foot to remove half of essentially his arms and legs in the military, just so that he can uphold righteous values? So the now purged commander, specifically if we talk about this guy here, the Wang Houbin guy, this guy is supposed to be the replacement of the disloyal crowd, right? He was put in there from the Navy, because you got to remember, like any military branch, seniority, rankings, or even experience within the branch itself is what the soldiers trust, is what garners confidence and leadership, but also the commanding power. So when you bring in a guy from the Navy to tell the rocket force people what to do, that obviously, expertise or leadership is probably not the priority. It was about loyalty. And then only to say that 2 years later, he's done. But also, if you think about it, Xi Jinping has had to do this purge thing since day one he's been in power against the military. And if Xi Jinping is willing to do this, where every so often, every 2 years or so, he's going to change the number of generals, that itself is a problem, because that tells us that nobody is really capable, nobody is loyal enough, and nobody is not corrupt for him to choose as a person to lead the charge of invading Taiwan, which means that can he ever have a plan in motion to invade Taiwan? So why do I say Zhang Youxia is the one that actually purged these generals? Well, for one, there's a little chance that obviously Zhang Youxia himself is not going to become like a Burma-style, like junta military leadership. Usually the CCP is concentrated the commanding power of the military within the civilian title, which is the General Secretary, the chair of the Central Military Commission. And so they put it, or at least modern day CCP would put it into a single person to avoid the fact that the military could turn on itself. But also because the military of the CCP has at decisive times come out to support one faction over another. A great example of this is in 1991, when Deng Xiaoping was going on the Southern tour. The military came out with a commentary to basically support the reform and opening up. I did a whole video on this, so I will try to find it and link it. But that's the argument here. So the military won't start a coup by itself, right? The fact that this came from the Ministry of Defense, not the Xinhua news agency, is also out of the ordinary, because I'll give you an example. This is the CCTV broadcast from 2024, June of 2024. This was announcing the removal of Li Shangfu, who is the former defense minister. They gave him a whole 2 minutes and 30-second broadcast to talk about this announcement. Okay, so this is the CCTV state media broadcast from the 17th, which is when it happened. If you actually look through all of the different stories and reports here, they don't mention any of this. Like the Chinese Central Television does not make mention of such a major news that 9 generals has been taken down, and yet there's no single mention of it. Okay, that's very strange. So that was 2025, October 17th, which is the day before today. And then if you go on to, so this is today's broadcast, which is now the 18th, again makes no mention of the actual removal. So it's been 2 days, and they have not yet made any announcement on the state central television. There's been reports done by Xinhua that's a repost basically of this story. But after the announcement from the Ministry of Defense, there's been no official civilian side of the propaganda that has come out to follow up with that, right? Which is usually, very strange. What that indicates to me is that the civilian propaganda and the military propaganda aren't in sync. So that's actually a really bad thing, because that means the military side people acted alone on this. Let's actually go down the logical thought exercise process. Let's actually consider that this event was started by Xi Jinping anyways, right? So let's say these generals are really corrupt. What would be the corrupt case that would put all 9 of these generals together in a room to conspire against Xi Jinping or the party? Because according to this PLA Daily editorial, it basically talks about how these 9 people are corrupt, right? So by their logic, if you read the article entirely, it does mention Xi Jinping and mentions a lot of stuff about corruption. But you have to consider what that means, right? If all 9 of these people are corrupt, that means they've been doing this for at least 2 years, because many of these were new people, like they haven't had a lot of time to do this, but they would have to have done this in like 2 years' time. What could be so powerful that would drive these people to want to do this? And when they do so, that must have been a major campaign that will basically cause them to lose their jobs and lose possibly their freedom. And yet somehow this thing was going under the radar for like a year or so before it was found. And if by that same logic, Zhang Youxia, the one that's been sitting at the top, right, the first vice chair, he has been here the longest and he has held the most influence. He has developed the most number of relationships in the military. He would be the most corrupt person. So if anything, Zhang Youxia should be the person that's been found to be corrupt and guilty before anybody else, because these people are new. But we've seen the opposite. And also, what makes Xi Jinping trust Zhang Youxia more than anybody? Is it based on the idea of loyalty? Well, again, because corruption is not the main reason, let's look at loyalty, right? The problem with loyalty is that it doesn't stand anymore. Because Xi Jinping, obviously, he purged a bunch of people before because of loyalty issues, and he put in these people who are more loyal than before, but maybe not as good for strategy or fighting capabilities, but Xi Jinping didn't care. So if now you're supposed to purge the loyal people again, and that Zhang Youxia is loyal to Xi Jinping, and he's doing all of this in exchange for the survival of his own safety, what guarantee does Zhang have that he won't be next, right? How loyal can we really think that Zhang can be if Xi Jinping doesn't trust that anybody is loyal to him? So that defeats the entire identity of that these people weren't loyal. Again, it goes back to this commentary that I was mentioning, right? This commentary here says that these people have violated serious crimes or serious issues with the Central Committee, which means maybe they conspired to start a coup together. But you got to remember, what major issue would they have come up with that allows them to do this? Where are they coming up with this idea? Because they're Xi's people. Does that mean that Xi was the one who actually came out with the idea of starting a coup? Are these people involved because Xi Jinping was trying to start a coup? So where did they get this idea of defying the rule and discipline of the Central Committee? It had to come from somewhere, because if these people are really loyal to Xi, they must have come from somewhere. And if you say that, well, of the 9 people, maybe one of them was the leader in this, that also doesn't make sense, because if you think about it, if it was one of the leaders, then that means that, he should be named first. Except you see that all 9 people are named together. Okay, so going back to that loyalty thing, right? Remember the whole branch reshuffle, moving people from the Navy to the Rocket Force. that's already defeated the whole purpose with like fighting power, with seniority, with capabilities, right? All it's done is just given loyalty, and now we see that loyalty doesn't exist anymore. And if you say that Zhang Yuxia is doing this willingly in exchange for the safety of his own life, well, is he doing that knowing that this is the only way, or is he doing that unknowingly, or he doesn't know that he could be next? Either way, like, I don't think he's that dumb. Now, the third piece of the puzzle is if Xi Jinping is putting in people, who are in charge of the Taiwan invasion, and they're not capable of it, that's why they got removed. Okay, so again, not just setting aside all the other stuff, but just because of this removal, they've set back the invasion 3 to 5 years. So if Xi Jinping continues to do this like yearly or every 2 years, then that means the Taiwan invasion could never happen because they will never have a series of commanding officers in place who could carry out these missions. The whole purge thing happened is sort of an alarm clock before the fourth plenum to indicate to us that something major will happen. I hope we see that it is Xi Jinping stepping down. And if it doesn't happen, well, then it's probably going to continue until 2026, which is the 21st Party Congress. But the evidence so far indicates a big reshuffle. All right, thank you so much for watching this episode. Hope it cleared up a little bit on as to what is happening in the Chinese military. And let me know your thoughts in the comment. Thanks again for watching this episode of Elite Politics. We'll see you next time.